From 1910 to 1945, the Japanese Empire deprived our sovereignty through embassy war and illegal colonization. It made compulsory mobilization of around 800,000 Koreans into Japan. In 1945, the United States dropped 8 bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The number of Koreans who suffered from the bombing is estimated to be around 70,000 to 100,000, while numbers of deaths amounted to about 50,000. A considerable number of the victims were drafted workers through forced mobilization by the Japanese Empire. Although around 43,000 A-bomb survivors returned to their liberated homeland, they faced nothing but neglect from the South Korean government and poverty and social mistreatment resulting from the aftermath of the bombings. Suffering threefold from Japan's compulsory mobilization, the USA bombings, and the South Korean government's neglect, Korean A-bomb victims gained consciousness of their need for reparations through the conclusion of the 1965 treaty between Japan and the Republic of Korea. To make their voices heard, they founded the Association of Korean A-bomb Victims on February 11, 1967. On November 4, 1967, around 20 A-bomb victims carried out a protest with a banner that read, "Reparations of my body," in front of the Japanese embassy. Son Gi-dal, who suffered the bombing when she was forcibly mobilized into Mitsubishi shipyard, illegally entered Japan to demand medical treatment for Korean A-bomb victims for the first time. However, Japan refused her request. In December 1968, Im Bok-sun from Seoul and Nam Bun-yeon from Busan received treatment in Hiroshima's A-bomb specialized hospital thanks to Hiraoka Takashi, a reporter from Jukoku newspaper. After treatment, they applied for the issue of A-bomb victims' medical notebook as the first victims residing in Korea, but Japan refused their request. On April 10, 1970, there was an effort to build a memorial tower for the Korean A-bomb victims inside the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, proposed by Yoon Byung-do, a Korean A-bomb victim residing in Hiroshima, and fundraised by Koreans living in Japan. This effort, however, was obstructed by Japan and precipitated the unveiling ceremony to be held outside the Peace Memorial Park. From 1970 to 1978, Son Jin-do from Busan, a Korean victim who secretly entered Japan for treatment, was issued an A-bomb victims medical notebook after 80 years of president's lawsuit, opening the way for the Korean A-bomb victims to be supported. On July 1, 1971, upon the Japanese Prime Minister Sato's visit to Korea, around 10 Korean A-bomb victims went to the Japanese embassy to deliver a letter in which they demanded Japan to take measures for medical facilities, living, and their children's education, and were forcibly arrested. On August 6, 1971, 10 or so Korean victims cried out, "The US government should also reparate Korean A-bomb victims," in front of the United States Embassy in Seoul. On March 6, 1975, Lee Nam-soo, victim of the A-bombing after the compulsory draft in 1942, passed away, leaving in final words, "After I die, leave my coffin to the Japanese embassy, and don't do any funeral service unless we receive reparations from Japan." On February 8, 1988, Shin Young-soo, president of the Korean A-bomb Victims Association, and 4 victims met with Yanai Shinichi, a Japanese ambassador, and delivered a letter of demand on $2.3 billion for the medical expenses for around 25,000 surviving Korean A-bomb victims. On March 22, 1990, around 300 victims gathered at the National Assembly and held a determination rally demanding apology and reparations from Japan. On June 11, 1990, Lee Meng-hee, a A-bomb victim, attempted suicide by taking poison in front of the Japanese embassy. Compelled by this incident, Kim Ok-sun publicly disclosed on August 14, 1991, that she was an enforced comfort woman for the Japanese military, publicizing the issue of comfort women to the world. On July 23, 1994, just before the South Korea-Japan Summit meeting, 113 South Korean atomic bomb victims held a rally at the Japanese embassy, pressuring Japan for reparations. In December of 1994, Japan enacted the Bill of Relief on the Protection of Japanese A-bomb victims, which limited supported subjects to the residents of Japan, excluding and discriminating A-bomb victims residing in Korea.
미국주의 침략 전쟁에 의해 지금 이 시간까지도 그 광기의 역사가 한국 원복이성 환우들의 몸과 마음을 관통하고 있는 현실을 인식해야 한다고 생각합니다.
On March 22, 2002, Kim Young-il, a second-generation A-bomb patient, held a press conference with his father Kim Bong-dae in Daegu and informed the world on the medical issues of the second-generation A-bomb patients. He organized the Association of the Second-Generation Patients of Korean Atomic Bomb Victims, starting a campaign on an enactment of Special Bill of Relief which will support generations affected by the bombings. In 2003, Kwak Ki-eun, an A-bomb victim, started the so-called Kwak Ki-eun trial and won, which opened a path for Korean A-bomb victims to be applied of and supported by the Japanese Bill of Relief. On October 19, 2005, victims occupied the office of the National Human Rights Committee, infuriated by the dealings of the Korean government who thoroughly neglected to support A-bomb victims. They had 13 days of a sit-in protest demanding enactment of the special law on the support of A-bomb victims, research on the actual conditions of victims and preparation of support measure, and renegotiation on the Korean-Japanese agreement. On September 20, 2011, Korean A-bomb victims held a press conference at the Japanese embassy, demanding its immediate annulment and renegotiation of the South Korea-Japan agreement on the right to claim damages, as well as for the Japanese government's apology and reparations. On May 24, 2012, South Korean Supreme Court ruled the Japanese Empire's colonial domination and compulsory mobilization as illegal. On August 12, 2013, victims demanded the South Korean government to raise the damage lawsuits and receive Japan's apology and reparations for the A-bomb victims. On April 27, 2015, Solidarity for Peace and Reunification of Korea, also known as SPARC, and People's Solidarity for Participatory Democracy, also known as PSPD, visited the U.S. Department of State and demanded its acknowledgement of the existence of Korean A-bomb victims and act on the investigation and reparations for victims, but the U.S. refused recognition.
우리나라는 미국이 열명기 전에 하루라도 속히 피해자에 대한 사죄를 요구합니다.
On May 1st, 2015, victims Sim Jin-tae and Kim Bong-dae raised the issue of Korean A-bomb victims for the first time at the UN and inquired the accountability for the original sin of the United States that conducted the bombings.
한국인 엄포 피해자 특별법을 제정하라!
On September 8, 2015, people held a rally at the National Assembly to demand the enactment of special laws on the support of A-bomb victims. They appealed for the US and Japan to apologize to South Korean A-bomb victims. On May 26, 2016, President Obama, visiting Japan, acknowledged the existence of Korean A-bomb victims for the first time as the President of the United States, referring to thousands of Koreans among the victims of the USA bombing. Upon Obama's visit to Japan, Korean A-bomb victims and SPARC traveled to Hiroshima together and demanded acknowledgement of Korean A-bomb victims, calling for reparations. On May 29, 2016, a special law on the support of A-bomb victims was enacted in the National Assembly 71 years after the A-bombings. Despite the enactment, the law contained nothing on the support of second generation and other descendant victims of A-bombings. On October 27, 2018, people held a general meeting in creation of the Association for the Descendants of Korean A-bomb Victims through the integration of the Association of Second Generation Patients from A-bombings and the Association of Second Generation of the A-bomb Victims for public acknowledgement that the second and the third generation descendants were also A-bomb victims. On February 21st, 2019, upon the 100th anniversary of March 1st Independence Movement, people held a press conference at the Presidential House demanding President Moon Jae-in's visit to Hapcheon in support of second and third generation victims by amending the Special Bill of Relief for supporting A-bomb victims. With the agreement on the recording of oral statement on April 25, 2019, use of Spark started on recording of oral statements on Korean A-bomb victims. They also drove for the enactment of regulation for the support in broader regions and special cities, which do not have regulation on the support of victims. On June 28, 2019, upon the United States President Trump's visit to South Korea, about 250 victims held a press conference and marched around the U.S. Embassy, inquiring the responsibility of the United States that orchestrated bombings and demanded for its apology and reparations. On November 25, 2019, Korean A-bomb victims joined the mass officiated by Pope Francis, who visited atomic bomb sites in Japan, publicly showing the existence of Korean A-bomb victims and their aspiration for non-nuclearization of Korean Peninsula and realization of nuclear-free world. They also pushed for international concern and participation for countries to join the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons Treaty. 2020 is the 75th year after the A-bombings. Justice and human rights to the A-bomb victims. We demand investigation, apology, and reparation for the Korean A-bomb victims.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Jane Addams branch meeting that we are doing with talking about the tribunal with the Korean Tribunal. It's a joint meeting, and Jane Addams branch is the branch of WILPF that's virtual, and it has members all over the country who don't have access to a local branch. So I'm just going to forward you on to Echo, who is a member of WILPF, and we've demonstrated together numerous times, and she's wonderful doing that. She's an organizer for Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network, and she lives in Fairfax, where I live too. So anyway, and I'm just going to let her MC the rest of it, dealing with the Korea issue. And so I'm turning it over now to you, Echo. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Many WILPF members and Korea Peace Now Grassroots members, thank you so much. The video you just watched was mainly put together by Spark, Solidarity for Peace and Unification of Korea, one of the major organizations working on this International People's Tribunal that's coming up in 2026. So today's panel, 3 presenters will be going over what will be going on in the next 2 years or so, and you kind of watch through the video kind of the history of the Korean A-bomb victims. Mainly, if you are unaware of today's webinar, Japan occupied Korea. Back then, it was not North or South Korea, it was one Korea. And when the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombs went over, there were many Korean victims who were currently living at the time in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because they were basically being slaved by the Japanese imperial government, and they were forcibly moved to Japan from Korea. There was about 100,000 Koreans. So this issue is not well known. So Spark and other organizations have worked really incredibly hard to shed light to this issue, and now they are getting ready to do International People's Tribunal. So let's learn more about this and what will be going on in the next 2 years or so. So today we have 3 panels. Joseph, who's actually joining from Japan. He's with the Japan chapter of World Beyond War. And Clara Lee is a Spark Youth member, and Elliot Adams, Veterans for Peace member. So let's start the conversation with Joseph. And after we hear from all three people, we can do Q&A and short discussion. And then there will be WILPF Jane Addams branch meeting after the presentation and discussion is over, which is going to be around 9 p.m. Eastern time. So Joseph, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Joseph Essertier, and I am the coordinator of the Japan branch of World Beyond War. Thank you, the Jane Addams branch, for organizing this event, and thank you and allowing us, the organizing committee of the Tribunal, to speak with you and Korea Peace Now today about this project. First, I would like to say that for me, this tribunal is mostly about reconciliation. Of course, we are trying to abolish nuclear weapons too, but for me personally, that long-term goal is secondary. You all know that reconciliation is essential for a just and lasting peace. Well, this is, I think, a fantastic opportunity for us to make the perpetrators of what is probably or arguably the most unforgivable war crime in history, the bombing of Nagasaki, to make those perpetrators apologize to Korean A-bomb victims, and for those A-bomb victims to enjoy, to taste at least a little justice. We are now in the process of building a consensus that the perpetrators or the inheritors of the government that originally committed the crime must apologize and compensate the victims, and that these weapons must never be used again. Some of the main purposes, according to the website set up to disseminate information about the tribunal, include the following. Quote, the A-Bomb Tribunal 2026 in New York has the primary purpose of restoring the collapsed historical justice by holding the U.S. legally responsible for the atomic bombings of 1945 and restoring the human rights of Korean A-bomb victims who were affected by Japanese colonial rule and the U.S. atomic bombings. The A-Bomb Tribunal aims to establish the illegality of the U.S. atomic bombings in 1945 to secure the basis for condemning all nuclear threats and use as illegal today. The fact that the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were illegal under the international laws in 1945 means that the use and threat of nuclear weapons today are also illegal. The A-Bomb Tribunal aims to overcome the nuclear deterrence theory that justifies the use and threat of nuclear weapons by nuclear weapon states and contribute to the realization of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and a nuclear-free world. Okay, that's a mouthful. Is my screen dirty? Maybe, sorry. Well, here, this, another way to say restoring the collapsed historical justice would be rectifying the historical injustice committed by the United States. That is, when they or we committed, we, because I'm a citizen of the United States, not because I was alive at the time, but our country, the United States, committed mass murder against Koreans who were victims of the colonialism of the Empire of Japan. Mass murder is wrong, 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 always wrong. That's all we are saying. Just like many peace organizations, we too will help build momentum toward establishing that idea. But we want to establish it not only in the hearts of millions of people, but also in international law. Of course, the vast majority of Korean atomic bomb victims were victims of circumstance. Many had been taken to Japan against their will. Others found themselves in Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a result of the economic instability and insecurity in Korea that was caused by the Empire of Japan's colonialist violence. Now, I'd just like to point, there's 3 points I want to make since we don't have, this is very short. I think, number one, I think the best short explanation of why we are holding this tribunal is on the webpage of the tribunal in a section entitled, "Do You Know About the Korean Atomic Bomb Victims?" There we find these words: Korean and global nuclear victims stand as powerful symbols of peace, bearing the heavy cross of the nuclear age. They are committed to realizing a Korean peninsula and a world free of nuclear weapons. Yes, they bear a heavy cross. They were victims of Japanese colonialism and also victims of this US atrocity, an attack on an already defeated country. Japan had already lost the war at that point on August 6, 1945. And they're victims of a Cold War that our country, at least partially, was responsible for. And just like Okinawans, Koreans did not start the Pacific War or the China War. They did not profit from these wars. And in no way were they perpetrators of state violence against Japan, against the US, or against anyone. So yes, it is hard to find a more powerful example of living symbols of peace, that term that they use, symbols of peace, than the Korean A-bomb victims. US citizens should be aware that it was the US that originally nuclearized the Korean Peninsula. It was our government who introduced nuclear cannons and Honest John nuclear-tipped missiles into South Korea in 1958 in open violation of the 1953 Armistice Agreement. The agreement that we signed that prohibited the introduction of qualitatively new weaponry. We continued stockpiling weapons for decades until 1991. And then we switched to more effective conventional weapons. Okay, so the point, that's first point, is that Korean A-bomb victims are outstanding symbols of peace. Point two, Japan, the original colonizer of Korea, paved the way for US oppression. But if we are talking about nukes, then we must admit that the US, our country, has the greatest responsibility for the nuclear crisis on the peninsula. It is our responsibility, those of us who are US citizens and who benefit in various ways from the US empire, to think about this, to talk about it, to get our government to apologize to the Korean A-bomb victims, and yes, denuclearize the peninsula, all of the peninsula, not just North Korea, but also South Korea. Our country, point three, our country has never negotiated in a sincere way. In 2019, Trump demanded complete capitulation from North Korea, with a population, our population, 13 times larger and a defense budget 150 times larger, hundreds of military bases nearby, aircraft carriers, 100 times more missiles, submarines with nukes. Our government had the gall to demand that North Korea give up their nuclear deterrent, as well as all their chemical and biological weapons programs, while we keep all our weapons of mass destruction. They tell us where their nukes are, allow inspectors in to study their facilities. They dismantle all their nuclear facilities and find new jobs for all their nuclear scientists and technicians. After that, then we will give them a promise to not attack. Great. And Trump was the first president to actually go sit down and talk with them. All through the period, we have never negotiated with North Korea in a good faith manner. Finally, okay, those were my 3 points. Finally, in conclusion, Joseph Gersing has pointed out the significance of the fact that Hee Dan-kyo, last year's recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, did mention the Korean hibakusha. The Hee Dan-kyo speaker said, Korean hibakusha who were exposed to the atomic bombings in Japan and returned to their home countries as well as many hibakusha who emigrated to the United States, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, and other countries after the war, suffered from both diseases unique to hibakusha. And from both diseases are the actual physical health problems as well as discrimination that they faced in Japan and in their home country. And from a lack of understanding by others of the damage caused by the A-bomb. That ends the quote. Sadly, North Korean A-bomb victims, I mean the ones who returned to North Korea and became citizens there, were not mentioned at all. And he used the word Kankoku, meaning South Korea. It was translated as Korea, but Chosen is the original name for the Korean Peninsula. And Chosen Hanto the word Joseon Hanto could have been used, but he used the word Kankoku. So that's unfortunate. But I feel like we are making progress. NHK, Japan's public broadcaster, which is the equivalent of our NPR, put out a video entitled Korean Hibakusha Share Spotlight at Nobel Peace Prize Ceremony. I think this was a big deal. It would have been more just and fairer if Koreans had been allowed to give a speech too, and if their history had been explained a little. But even this brief mention of the existence of Korean A-bomb victims was encouraging. It means that progress is being made. And not long ago, the Korean victims were completely ignored. Now they're not being ignored. So let's build on this. Let's keep the momentum going. Let's all work together to raise awareness and build this movement for justice, for the Korean victims, for reconciliation, for a world free of nuclear weapons, and for peace. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and for your plea and your appeal. So let's hear from Clara, more specifically on the IPT project, International People's Tribunal project.
Wow. Hello, everyone. Can you see the screen well?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Clara, and I'm joining from South Korea as a member of SPARC and the International People's Tribunal project. I'm grateful to speak with all of you today, knowing that we share a deep commitment to peace on the Korean Peninsula. As you saw in the video, Korean atomic bomb victims and their suffering, struggle for justice, and need for recognition have largely been overlooked for decades after World War II and during the Cold War. For years, they were dismissed as unavoidable casualties of war, and their demands for justice were silenced and ignored. But what the video also teaches us is that despite the marginalization and erasure, Korean atomic bomb victims have been unwavering in their demands for rightful reparations and justice. And today, the victims are demanding accountability and redress from the US for dropping the atomic bombs. The IPT project, initiated by SPARC and the Korean atomic bomb victims, and currently joined in solidarity by many peace organizations and activists, legal scholars, and students, is a crucial step towards justice. It started in 2015 when SPARC accompanied Korean atomic bomb victims to the NPT conference. And since then, the project involved collecting and publishing oral histories, carrying out domestic and international campaigns, educating the youth, and holding public events to amplify their voices. The urgency of this tribunal is reflected in the words of the victims themselves. Mr. Shin Jin-tae, one of the plaintiffs, have shared a deeply personal and urgent message. Quote, "Before I die, I feel it is my duty to make people aware of the dangers of nuclear weapons on Earth. The first step towards this goal is to secure an apology from the US, a country that has never acknowledged its responsibility for dropping atomic bombs. And Mr. Igiar, another plaintiff, said, quote, "If the US admits and apologizes for the responsibilities of the atomic bombings in 1945, no country will ever consider using nuclear weapons." We have another quote here from Takashi Hiraoka. He's the former mayor of Hiroshima and the co-chair of the IPT. And he made this passionate statement at the second forum that we had last year in June. Quote, "The US has long justified the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If we do not hold the US accountable for these actions, the abolition of nuclear weapons will never advance. In essence, if the bombings are seen as justified, we cannot condemn any future use of nuclear weapons by other countries. So I've always believed that the US must be held accountable for dropping the bombs. I hope that this IPT will create a new vision of a nuclear-free world." And I think that these words really reflect the determination of those who suffered from the atomic bombings, that the apology from the US is not only about redress, but also setting a precedent to prevent future devastations. The 1996 advisory opinion from ICJ on the legality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons may leave room for debate on whether their use might be considered legal in exceptional circumstances of self-defense. At the same time, the TPNW has faced limited impact, mainly due to the failure of nuclear weapon states to ratify it. In this context, the IPT will play a crucial role. It not only seeks to hold the US accountable, but also aims to strengthen the global norm against nuclear weapons. When Mr. Ko Young-dae spoke at the forum last June, he highlighted the pivotal role of the IPT in nuclear abolition movement. Quote, "The IPT holds immense significance in preventing the threat of nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia, as well as addressing concerns about nuclear escalation in Europe, particularly in the context of Ukraine war. In a world marked by increasing nuclear tensions, the Tribunal offers more than a platform to confront the atrocities of the past. It creates a pathway for lasting peace. For the Korean Peninsula, a region teetering on the edge of nuclear conflict, the stakes could not be higher." But I also want to say that this isn't just Korean issues, they're international issues. The fight for justice for atomic bomb victims is inseparable from broader international movement for nuclear abolition. Whether in Korea, Japan, or among Black and Indigenous communities, we have to hear the voices of those victims of nuclear weapons use, but also production and testing. Their struggle is about more than looking back. It's about shaping a future free from the threat of nuclear destruction. One of the important aspects addressed at the first and second forum was connecting the dots between the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the division of Korea, and the ongoing nuclear confrontations that persist on the Korean Peninsula today. As Professor Lee Sam-sung pointed out at the first forum, the atomic bombings had a profound and far-reaching impact on the Korean Peninsula. Quote, "After the atomic bombings, the Cold War between the US and Soviet Union intensified, making dialogue and cooperation for the establishment of a unified government on the Korean Peninsula impossible. The US dropped atomic bombs to contain the Soviet Union, and as a result, solidified the division of Korea." Unquote. During the Korean War, the US even contemplated using nuclear weapons twice on the peninsula. And following the armistice, the US and South Korea formed a military alliance, and the US secretly deployed tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea for 2 years before officially acknowledging their presence in 1958. This marked the beginning of the long-standing nuclear regime, with the US providing a nuclear umbrella to South Korea in 1978, and later providing extended deterrence in 2006 after North Korea's first nuclear test. More recently, in 2023, South Korea and the US officially declared themselves as, quote, nuclear alliance, significantly strengthening extended deterrence through the Washington Declaration. And last year, the US also propelled its trilateral alliance with South Korea and Japan to encircle China, while simultaneously revising the nuclear employment guidelines. All these developments underscore the risk that tension and conflict on Korean Peninsula could escalate into regional wars, with the potential to trigger a nuclear conflict at both regional and global levels. Extended deterrence represents one of the most extreme military strategies, relying on the threat of nuclear weapons as means to deterrence through the concept of mutual assured destruction. And it is fundamentally at odds with the principle of the UN Charter, which explicitly prohibits the use and threat of force. The very premise of extended deterrence relies on the potential use of strategic nuclear weapons, inherently carrying the risk of catastrophic destruction, not only of military targets, but of civilians and environment at large. And we as nuclear abolitionists understand that extended nuclear deterrence is a violation of international law and an existential threat to world peace. Far from promoting peace, extended deterrence and military alliances often escalate tensions, fuel crisis, and prepare for war, all while blocking the path to a peaceful resolution. We know all too well, as we witness the horrors and suffering in Gaza and Ukraine, that entrenched military alliances fuel the fire to violence and destruction. What we need is a paradigm shift. For example, easing extended deterrence opens the door to diplomatic engagement and conflict resolution. Historically, the suspension of Team Spirit joint military exercises in 1992 and 1994 played a key role in resolving the first North Korean nuclear crisis, culminating in the Geneva Agreed Framework between the US and North Korea. More recently, the suspension of North Korean ICBM tests and the reduction of joint military exercises by the US and South Korea in 2018 and 2019 helped diffuse tensions and led to agreements like the Singapore and Panmunjom declarations. While North Korea's continued pursuit of nuclear weapons and its rejection of denuclearization really complicates the situation, addressing the root causes of its nuclear weapons production and stockpile offers a pathway to a new approach. This is why SPARC continues to call for a peace treaty to formally and legally end the Korean War, which will then create a pathway for dismantling nuclear confrontations, abolishing extended deterrence and military alliance systems, and ultimately achieving lasting peace and genuine security. The IPT project contributes directly to this goal by holding the US accountable for the illegal 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki under international law and envisioning a world free of nuclear weapons. The goal of this tribunal is to seek an apology, demand compensation, and ensure the prevention of future nuclear use. The tribunal will take place in New York next year, with first and second generation victims serving as plaintiffs. It will be presided over by a panel of 5 judges, and our organizing committee is very much hard at work, including the legal review team led by Professor Daniel Riediker and supported by 7 international law scholars. The committee also includes an organizing, public relations, and operations team led by Brett Wolf. And recently, youth activists from South Korea, the US, and Japan have recently launched an international campaign calling for justice. The success of this tribunal really depends on active engagement and support from those who are committed to denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula and the creation of a world free of nuclear weapons. The Korean atomic bomb victims are determined to hold the US accountable, demand a formal apology, and seek reparations It is a brave and a necessary step towards justice, and we believe that your involvement is critical to ensuring that this tribunal achieves its missions. We ask for your sustained attention, participation, and solidarity for this important cause. Thank you.
So much, Clara. So next presenter would be Elliot with Veterans for Peace. And as Clara just mentioned, we are having this session today so that we are actively engaging and learning about the International People's Tribunal coming up and find ways on how we can support. So Elliot with Veterans for Peace.
Glad to be here. Good evening. Thank you to WILPF and Peace Now for organizing this webinar. The A-bomb Tribunal is important to many people for different reasons. The need of Korean victims to be recognized, the right of Koreans and the world to be apologized to for the illegal and inhumane bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the tribunal is also important to all Americans, indeed, all people of the world, with a message that the A-bombs were illegal in 1945 and they are illegal today. Today, after studying the A-bombs, the extinction of the dinosaurs, the recent volcanic eruptions in Krakatoa and Pinatubo, we understand much better the risk of any nuclear exchange of modern weapons. Beyond the elimination of a city and region and all the lives destroyed by a bomb, beyond the radiation poisoning which will spread around the globe, we now know that even a limited exchange by just 2 nuclear powers, say Pakistan and India, will cause a nuclear winter, which will result in 3 years of continuous winter when there will be no summer anywhere on Earth. In other words, an extinction like the great extinction of dinosaurs. Today, we are closer to a nuclear holocaust than we have ever been. For example, the US military actually believes they can fight and win a nuclear war. The generals will hide in their bunkers, will come out to declare their victory before they succumb with all the rest of us to nuclear winter. The US is openly playing nuclear war chicken with Russia over Ukraine. The US is openly threatening nuclear war with North Korea. The US is belligerently threatening China, a nuclear state, not to mention the US role in the Middle East. This is unnecessary, reckless behavior which puts civil society around the world at risk. We now know that nuclear deterrent strategy from the 1950s doesn't work. It's really just a suicide strategy. The TPNW, Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, is very important, with 93 states having joined it so far. It is not a protection alone, because the great nuclear powers have not signed it yet, including the US, which is the only power to have used A-bombs, one of the few nations that doesn't have a no first use policy, and a nation that is bent on global domination and hegemony. The TPNW is important, but it's not enough by itself. The A-bomb Tribunal is a tool we have to educate and motivate the public to demand that our power holders start acting rationally to protect civil society. The tribunal's effectiveness depends on all of us. All of us. The more we talk about it, the more we advertise it, the more we spread the word, the more effective it will be, and the safer we will be. Let me offer you an image. You stand near a precipice which descends into the abyss of nuclear holocaust. Through the darkness of the abyss, we cannot even see the bottom. We step back from the precipice in fear, in prudent caution. Alarmingly, further along the precipice, we can see world leaders playing music and dancing gleefully on the edge of the precipice, apparently oblivious of the danger they create for all of us. In closing, I appeal to you. No, I beg you to work with us to build the 2026 ABON Tribunal, to get recognition for the Korean victims, to get reparations for all victims, and to abolish nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elliot, Veterans for Peace, and WILPF, and Code Pink, all these great organizations that are my protest buddies in DC. Thank you so much for your time today, and the appeal and the presentation and the horrible image that you were portraying. So we have about 10 minutes for Q&A and discussion. Many people might be familiar with this issue, but please do ask specifically on the Korean ABOM victims and 2026 tribunal. Yes, Teresa?
Thank you, Echo. This is amazing. I had no idea how long ago this conflict started and the Japan connection. I thought it was simply the U.S. and the North-South Korea conflict going on. And I'm particularly interested in what's happening currently on the peninsula. I know you're trying to narrow it to the tribunal, but it's not static, it is connected. And hearing recently that the South Korean government collapsed, I'm wondering what the impact on the problem of conflict on the peninsula on women and children in the current situation as we prepare for the tribunal. Thank you.
That is very deep conversation and a lot, but actually at Women Across DMZ, we are getting a report ready. It's Women's Rights Report, actually, that's gonna be released in March around the Women's Day. So maybe we could have a little bit more discussion after the report releases and to go into that. But if Clara or Joseph briefly want to touch on the current situation that is relevant to the IPT and the ABOM victims.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Elliot too about his view of what's happening, but the fact that President Yoon was arrested and that a lot of information has been coming out. There's lots of evidence showing that he was trying to restart the Korean War. That is really shocking, and it demonstrates how dangerous, how volatile the situation is. That the war never ended. A lot of Americans assume that just because the two sides are not fighting, that the war is, that we can all sit back and relax. But no, the chance of that war breaking out again, that has been there all these years, and it's created stress and people all throughout the region. It's the Cold War. The chance of the Cold War becoming a hot war again has always been there, And yeah, so it shows how relevant this is. And yeah, again, that the Korean victims are symbols of peace. And yeah, even I think in in East Asia, if and when we are successful in getting an apology from the United States, it would have a profound impact on East Asia. And remember how many people live in this area, in this region of the world. You know how many people live in China. Japan's one of the largest countries, and you've got Russia. So yeah, that was a good, interesting question. I haven't really thought about how it's affecting women and children, but
Yeah.
Elliot has been to Korea fairly
I think
recently.
is a great question, and I think it's an interesting one to talk about. I think it's a little bit of a distraction from our issue here. I mean, clearly, well, I don't, better not get me started on this one. I could talk all evening on this one. So I would suggest we see if there's another question. And I would be happy to talk to anybody about this one, but I think we'd like to talk about the tribunal at this point.
Darian.
Thank you. I do very much appreciate, Teresa, the connection between, or highlighting the connection between the use of nuclear weapons by the US and current policy in Korea and the separation of North and South Korea. That direct line is a surprise. I thank you for emphasizing the point that making it no longer acceptable to use nuclear weapons can be contributed to by a US apology. And the apology seems like a long-term goal, but it's excellent to hear about this, and certainly it's a timely topic. I know there wasn't quite a question in there, so I guess that was more a comment. I apologize. I thought I had a question.
It's okay. Thank you so much for that comment, Darian. And maybe at the next WILPF meeting, amongst WILPF members, we can talk about how we can better support IPT and do more education sessions. And we are in this issue all together at Korea Peace Now. We educate, advocate, and organize to end the Korean War. And this is the issue. Clara's presentation covered the whole root cause of the Korean War, the division, and the around 1945, the whole thing going on in that era of history, still continuing and lingering on after 71 years with no reparation and no resolve.
The support for militarism that the whole situation represents is something we can confront on January 18th at the many marches around the country and other actions. And I hope people will tie in these issues of nuclear weapons, peace, foreign policy, gamesmanship, the Ukraine, it goes on and on. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darian. Other questions? We have about 5 minutes. So if there's no other questions from Spark, do you want to share anything that's upcoming? I know some people are coming to New York in March, and maybe some of the WILPF people are going to be in New York for CSW and other events, other UN events. So maybe that's an opportunity that we get together, meet some of the victims too.
I would be happy to put the contact information for the coordinators for our New York program in the chat. And if anyone wants to ask questions, I think the deadline for applications has passed, but I could be mistaken, or other information for next year.
Echo, I went to the link to try to sign up for updates about the tribunal, but I couldn't do it. Could somebody put a link in about updates for the tribunal? I'm very interested in the tribunal coming up in 2026.
So the link for that is this. So I guess you're subscribing to the email that IPT puts out. It's very simple, first name, last name, email. Oh, so there's a little small join button after the email. Maybe if you're using your phone, it's a little bit different. Yes, Clara, please.
Yeah, I think we want to share some upcoming plans about the tribunal. So the way it works is that first we have to submit and exchange written observations, which will be followed by public oral hearing and delivery of the judgment. So the current process is writing the written observation, and throughout that process, as you mentioned, Echo, March this year, Spark is planning to attend the TPNW meeting and also the third meeting of state parties. So during Spark's visit to the US, we're hoping to have more public relations and outreach events, and also hopefully educating audiences that will be participating at the final People's Tribunal next year. And it will probably be held between March and May. We're not exactly sure when, but around the same time when the MPT conference is going to be. And we are continuing to update our website. So yeah, so there's going to be more information uploaded if people can follow our website, abombtribunal.campaign.us.me. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara. Yes, thank you everybody for joining, subscribing to get updates. If there are other opportunities for us IPT members, Spark members to join your webinar, another session where they can talk about this issue to gain solidarity with another organization, please let me know, or Diane Blay, and I'll be in touch with you. I could coordinate. So actually, Veterans for Peace Conference back in August invited the IPT people and did their presentation, which we thought was really great opportunity, great education session. So we are trying to do more of this so that we're building solidarity and that we're educating the public, so that when the day comes in 2026, we have a lot of people attending and supporting this issue. So thank you everybody for tonight. And if you were a panelist, you're free to leave. If you want to stay on for a WILPF Jane Addams meeting, that is fine. But good night for some, and some of us will stay here in the room.
Well, thank you all for your presentations and coming, and sincere good wishes on this tribunal as you work on it. Thank you. So yeah, now we're going to go with our typical meeting. And basically what I do, I open it up to the board members first. And I know Darian, this will be her last meeting that she will attend as president of WILPF US. And so I'm very excited to have her here. And I think she's worked so hard, 6 years as president. So Darian, final words at your Jane Addams meeting. Thank you. Unmute.
Yes, we are the great muted horde being unlistened to by our government today because of Zoom. But more seriously, greetings everyone. This was a very both somber program this evening and also inspiring to have the commitment and to be going strong after this long. So I want to be sure to invite everyone tomorrow night to our special reinitiation of the WILPF US website. We'll have a guided tour of the website. We'll hear from people who have been in there in the trenches with their wrenches, working on the virtual everything that you will see. And we welcome your input, but please, we've worked on this for 5 years. So your input would preferably be compliments and praise. And next year you can give us your critiques. We're critical enough of ourselves at this point. And we all need appreciation. So I do want to appreciate Echo and Elliot, and I don't know how to pronounce your name. I believe it was Hiran who did the other part of the program. My apologies if I've mixed things up. This work is not highly paid, and it's not highly rewarded by attitudes in our society. So we keep doing it in any case. And there are many opportunities in WILPF coming up in 2025 to plug into actions. We also will be looking forward to a new e-news editor who will be doing her first issue for the February issue. And we will additionally be talking about hiring an executive director for the first time after a number of years. We'll discuss that at the board meeting on January 25th. If you are interested in the board meeting, I'll put an address in the chat so that you can be invited to it if you're a WILPF member. The board meetings are limited to members. Also, I'll put in the chat the link to register for the website gala launch tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? I don't know if anyone else from the board is here that wants to speak, but if not, we can go to the issue committee chairs, and whoever wants to speak can do that. Issue committee chairs. And then the next thing we have our branch.
I just want to add one thing. Seeing that we have no one from the issue committees, I hope everyone will join me in a hopeful and delighted hurrah for a ceasefire coming up this weekend, we hope, in Gaza. So for me, that was some of the best news in a while. So hurrah for a ceasefire in Gaza. May it be so. May it be so, and may no one be killed between now and then.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm co-chair of the Disarm Committee, and so we have different campaigns we're working on, and we're going to be at the TPNW in early, and that is before the CSW, the week before the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women. So the Disarm is, we're definitely going to be supporting this tribunal. I see Teresa has her hand raised, and she's Advancing Human Rights Chair. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you. Advancing Human Rights Committee and the Fannie Lou Hamer branch kind of co-hosted the first ever Southeast Regional Gathering on Saturday, January 11th. It was a 3-hour meeting, and I think most will agree it was highly successful. We got one new member who will be joining next month from the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. Advancing Human Rights has a meeting coming up tomorrow evening. It is at 6:30, and it will be 1 hour, so it will not interfere with the website meeting, which I do plan to attend. Lucy Murphy, who is convener, one of the co-conveners of the DMV branch, recently came back from Cuba, and she will be speaking on her trip to Cuba about the UN decade. And as many of you may have heard, we're now in the second UN decade declared by the General Assembly of the UN. And this decade will run from January 1, 2025 to December 31st, 2034. And it still calls for recognition, justice, and development. And as many of you know, when the triennial for WILPF International happens, I expect it will be next year in 2026. The US section and all sections are obligated to report on what we have done in support of the UN decade. And I would like to announce that in collaboration with Code Pink, the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress, the International Peace Bureau, and World Beyond War, George Friday and I, representing the Southern Anti-Racism Network, are organizing a Women in Conflict Zones webinar, which will take place on March 19th of this year at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And I did announce this at the MEPJAC committee meeting last evening, which was very productive. And we're getting ready to do some serious work on Gaza and the fact that the genocide in Gaza will continue unless the whole world community stops Israel. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Sure. And another big event that is that Cuba was removed from the list of state sponsors of terrorism, that Biden finally did it after he had promised more than 4 years ago he would, but he just did or will anyway. So this is very exciting too. And we have the Cuban Bolivarian Issue Committee, Bolivarian Alliance Issue Committee, who has been trying to get that done for ever since too. So, okay, I'm opening up to any branch leaders now who want to say anything, or just anyone, any WILPF person who would like to just have a question or say something about what you're doing in your branch, or any event that you're working on. So I'm opening up the floor, and I'll open it to everyone. If anybody wants to say anything about some event or something, please do. Okay, I see Joan Goddard has her hand raised. So Joan, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you very much to the Jane Addams branch, but also to the speakers, of course, and the wonderful work that you all are doing. Thank you for the information, but also for the work. Mercy. Thank you. It's been a long time.
Speakers, thank you so much. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anything else, and I do like 1-hour meetings, so I'm going to say adios until we have the meetings the third Wednesday every month at this same time. The Jane Addams meeting is open to all WILPF members. And so, okay, until next month. Oh, Darian has her hand raised about something. Go ahead, Darian.
Of course, there are a million events this weekend, and I don't think I have to remind people about all of them, but I will remind people that we continue to be inspired by the model and the insights of Martin Luther King Jr. And his holiday is coming up in many communities. It's an occasion when working class people come together and people of different races. Hurrah for such occasions.
And today is his birthday.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. But one can easily forget. It's so movable.
Okay, Teresa, you have something else to say?
Well, I just wanted to remind ECHO to contact me about getting a South Korean speaker for the Women in Conflict Zones webinar. I did send ECHO my contact information. So please contact me, ECHO. Thank you.
I already emailed you, Teresa.
Great.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Lee, do you want to say something?
Yes, I'm not a member yet, but I will be. Tamara is part, and my grandmother was one of the founding members of WILPF. So I didn't know that. I found that out later in my life. But I just like to also mention Leonard Peltier was the American Indian Movement leader who was at Wounded Knee, and he's still in jail. He's really, really sick, and they refused to let him out. So there is a coalition of people that I've been writing and things, but it's not moving, and it sort of needs to happen really fast because Trump could care less. Anyway, he's a very influential person, and he established why the indigenous people in the United States was able to stand up. He was fearless. Okay, so
Call the White House this week.
pardon me.
Call the White House this week and ask Biden to.
Yeah, that's right. So I just wanted to mention that. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they had a big group of that had traveled across the country, and then they had a big demonstration in DC, you know, trying to get him free unsuccessfely.
Please say the name again. Which of the many people who need to get freed?
Leonard Patel.
Leonard Peltier. It's Leonard Peltier, and he influenced me a lot. And I'm from Canada because he influenced the whole United States and Canada. He was a very quiet person, but fearless. Yeah, and so he never killed anybody. Everybody knew from the onset it was a setup, but they just won't let him go. So he's dying, actually. He's been in solitary confinement for forever. Just that's what they do.
Solitary confinement, so awful. And thank you, Elizabeth, for joining. That's great. Cheryl Spencer's here. I don't know, Cheryl, did you want to say something? I actually didn't say much about disarm. Cheryl's is the motion behind the disarm issue committee.
So just, to please read the articles that we write for every e-news, because there are things we are asking you to do. There is a 28th of January, the doomsday clock will be reset, and we've been asked to try to use that fact, which is picked up by the major media, to bring attention to the awfulness of nuclear weapons to your local newspapers. So I, especially the disarm members, I've sent you information on how to do that. And on the 25th of January, there will be an afternoon in the East Coast, an afternoon conference on reducing the cost of nuclear weapons, trying to get the amount of military money spent on them reduced. Now, unfortunately, yesterday, the man standing to be Secretary of Defense with virtually no qualifications, during his hearing by the Senate Armed Services Committee, said for the first time, because this was not clear in the materials that the Trump administration sent out when they were saying what their policies were going to be. Oh yes, they're very gung-ho on replacing all the ICBMs, the very old ones that need replacing. It's called the Sentinel program. We've been writing to you about that. If it's going to take 30 years, it's going to cost $1.3 trillion, all in all. And one would hope that Elon Musk might, who's supposed to be finding ways to reduce the government's budget, you might have thought he might have said, oh, well, here, awful lot of money is being spent on nuclear weapons. So, but he's not saying that, apparently. He's going to cut Medicare and things like that help real people. So, as usual, Disarm wants you to be writing to your Congress people and urging them to not vote for so much money going to the military. That's an act called the NDAA. And Trump, being president, when he's president, will suggest a budget for NDAA. Then the House and the Senate discuss it. And we try and always get it reduced. That's the amount of money the military spent every year on 850 bases abroad and things like that. So WILPF was started as 110 years ago, as an organization working against war and for disarmament and for diplomatic negotiations to end conflict. So I hope you see that continues to be a very important part of WILPF. And what you all have a small part you can do is to talk to your Congress people about it. That's because they hold the purse strings. And because if they don't allow money to be spent on something, it won't be spent. So it really is your direct method to get to that military spending directly. So I was just in San Francisco at a very nice exhibition by a very famous woman artist called Mary Cassatt, who you may have heard of. She revolutionized art by drawing and painting women and children who up to that point, unless it was the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, you didn't see women and babies in art. But she did that a great deal, and now it's been recognized that, and she had techniques that she used. So it was very interesting for me to see the story of her life. And unfortunately, had to go to France to be able to do this. And but she was a friend of the Impressionists, and so she was able to have her paintings shown at Impressionist exhibitions in Paris in the 1900s. So we all need to, take some time off to relax from our efforts, to renew ourselves, and come Monday, we're going to have an awful lot of work to do. So thank you for Diane for this chance to speak to you. And I caught this cold in England last week.
I caught my cold in Florida, babysitting my grandchildren. So anyway, I'm sympathetic. Elizabeth Lee, you have your hand raised.
I think she just forgot to lower it from before.
Yeah, I think it's from before. Okay, well, with that, we're going to say thank you so much and adieu, and God bless, and take care, and let's get. We have a lot of work to do in the coming up, so take care. Thank you all. Bye.
Take care.
You recorded this, so now you will send out a recording later.
Oh, it's going to be on the WILPF US Today website. Yes, it'll be there.
YouTube
should have said, yeah.
Thank you.
WILPF US Today on YouTube.
All right. Well, good to see you all. Thank you for everything you can do.
And get healthy. Okay. Bye.